Tactical droids were introduced in Star Wars: The Clone Wars as unique enemy commanders that could be defeated again and again without tarnishing the reputations of more important antagonists. Sure enough, they were defeated quite commonly, and for all their bragging about their intelligence, they were often hilariously wrong. This got so bad that the CIS straight up replaced them, bringing in the Super Tactical Droid midway through the war and relegating the older units to secondary duties. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at tactical droids and why they were replaced.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
The T-Series Tactical Droid was a product of Bactoid Combat Automata, intended to serve as a droid army commander in the absence of an organic commander. They were far more intelligent than any of the Confederacy's battle droid models, and they were highly adept at statistics and tactical calculation. They served adequately as independent commanders, far better than B1 commanders did, and they served even better as command liaisons for organic generals. Unlike with rank and file battle droids, tactical droids had their own unique personalities, paint schemes, and voices, though all of them shared the same basic personality traits. Tactical droids on average were blunt, arrogant, and fond of lambasting the plans, tactical prowess, and overall intelligence of others, be they subordinates or superior officers. They weren't really all that stupid, however. On the contrary, they understood the tactics quite well, and they proved plenty capable of making intelligent and unorthodox command decisions. But as Star Wars: The Clone Wars showed, they had plenty of shortcomings. They were obnoxiously overconfident, and often wrongly so. There were many variables they repeatedly failed to take into account, from Jedi tactics to entire civilian populations. Over the course of the war, they went from a seeming challenge for the clones to just another droid commander class, and from there, they practically became a laughingstock. It got bad enough that, midway through the war, Bactoid rolled out new super tactical droids, which replaced the standard models in most roles. This was pretty much unheard of for the Confederacy. They next to never retired droid models in that way, instead preferring just to throw in the new with the old. What T-Series droids were left were relegated to glorified secretary roles. Super tactical droids performed better than their predecessors, but they still weren't perfect. The Clone Wars showed that it was still quite possible to defeat or otherwise outmaneuver them, and it can be somewhat difficult to see what exactly made them better. But they were indeed a marked improvement in several ways. The most well-known flaw of the old tactical droid was overconfidence.
You had better be right.
I am a droid. I am always right.
Tactical droids were definitely compensating for something, likely their weird proportions, ASMR voices, or boxy frames. They did so by spouting lines straight from r/I'm very smart, usually about how their calculations are always right, or how the odds are weighed heavily in their favor. Some, like TX-20, developed god complexes, as they clearly believed themselves to be superior to all organics, and most droids as well. They never expressed anything short of perfect confidence in their tactics or in their assessment of other commanders' tactics, often to the point of stubbornness. If you've ever worked in any sort of group, you probably know well enough why this was a major detriment to these droids' performance. They never admitted to being wrong, and this made them easy for clever Republic tacticians to outmaneuver. Like many people in the real world, they failed to acknowledge the inherently subjective nature of reasoning, instead asserting that, as their conclusions were based on facts and logic, they were infallible. They weren't, of course, and so tactical droids' overconfidence repeatedly resulted in defeats for the Confederacy. Super tactical droids eliminated this flaw. They were far better at recognizing when they needed to alter their plans, and though they still had plenty of confidence in themselves and their tactics, they nonetheless were much more capable of accepting the input of others. Perhaps more importantly, they weren't ruled by pride and understood the value of admitting when a battle was lost and retreating to conserve resources. In this, they were better than a good many organic commanders. These advantages likely stemmed from the fact that the Chad Super Tactical Droid had nothing to compensate for. They had much better proportions, their voices were a lot cooler, and their frames were sleeker and more aesthetic.
Underestimate our means. If the rebel army falls, the citizens will lose their courage, and order will be restored.
Another major flaw of the tactical droid was how confrontational they were. They didn't mince words, and when they thought their commanders were wrong, they told them so. This wasn't necessarily a bad thing, but what was a bad thing were the extremes to which these droids took it. They were maddeningly stubborn about disagreements with their commanders, and if they couldn't convince them, they proved perfectly willing to let those commanders die out of spite, even if it cost the Confederacy a battle. Now, disagreement isn't necessarily a bad thing, and the extremes tactical droids took their disagreements to did have some upsides. Before the first Battle of Plagueon, a tactical droid actually assassinated his superior officer. General P.R. Nagelsa completely discarded his battle plan and went on to bring about a Separatist victory. But this wasn't always how such things went. Another tactical droid tried something similar during the third Battle of Aphal, shooting Major Hum Garaf in the middle of the campaign, only for the execution to spark a firefight in the command center that turned the battle in the Republic's favor. Most of these disagreements ended up being more like the second case. At the very least, super tactical droids were a lot more tactful about their disagreements. They were still confrontational, and they were perfectly willing to put a few bolts in their superior officers if a battle started going poorly, but they knew where to draw the line. They better understood how killing fellow officers over tactical disagreements would cause problems, and if they felt that was the only way, they went about it in a much more subtle manner than their predecessors. Super tactical droids were also better at making their case when disagreements arose. Tactical droids had a bad habit of not explaining why they were right and only asserting that they were, which was problematic in its own right. But super tactical droids at least made an effort to articulate why they believed their methods were superior, and this often resolved internal conflicts without the need for assassination. Now, tactical droids weren't actually bad tacticians. They were actually right a decent amount of the time, and when they were wrong, it wasn't due to not understanding strategy. They were masters of conventional strategy, of logical tactics and maneuvers. Their biggest problem was that they didn't understand unorthodox. Oftentimes, the Jedi would employ tactics these droids would dismiss as illogical, and they would come out on top precisely because they were unexpected. For the first 2 years of the war, the Republic won almost exclusively through the use of unorthodox tactics, which flew in the face of military convention, and it absolutely bamboozled tactical droids. What's worse, there's evidence to suggest that tactical droids were outright incapable of understanding the unorthodox. This was TX-20's reaction to the illogical and unexpected happening during the Battle of Ryloth.
Ha 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 ha. You lose, General Kenobi. Does not compute. Does not compute. Does not compute. Does not compute.
It was illogical for the unarmed Twi'lek prisoners to leave safety to charge TX-20's tank, and so he dismissed it as an impossibility. But the Twi'leks charged out anyway, because living beings so frequently aren't logical, and TX-20 was completely unprepared for it. What's worse, he didn't just fail to understand why they were doing what they were doing, he pretty much blue-screened, doing absolutely nothing to adapt to the change in situation, instead just repeating that the situation doesn't compute. He let himself be destroyed. This appears to have been the biggest improvement made with the super tactical droid, and the reason the Confederacy took the rare step of sidelining the standard model. The super tactical droid understood organics better, and they understood unpredictable tactics. They never assumed that their enemies would act logically, and they never threw out possibilities completely, even if they were confident that it wouldn't happen. They still weren't perfect at dealing with them, but they never froze like TX-20 did, and that's a big improvement in any case. It's unknown to what degree they were capable of coming up with their own unusual tactics, but it's safe to say that if they could understand them, they could replicate them, though they'd surely prefer the conventional to the unorthodox. So that's why the CIS brought in the Chad Super Tactical Droid to replace the Virgin T-Series Tactical Droid. But what do you think? Which tactical droid voice is your favorite? Let us know in the comments section below. And just before we go guys, as per usual, make sure you check out all our links in the description below. We do have a new game mode, being Jedi vs Sith on our Geetsly's gaming network, so make sure you check that one out. and also do check us out on our Discord where you can chat to myself and other Star Wars fans, and the Patreon if you want to help support the channel more than you already are. Anyways guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.